All right, everybody. So I'm here in OCS with Mr. Kevin Smay, our Vice President for Institutional Effectiveness. Did I get it right?
That's close enough.
Okay, and
Yeah.
he's going to talk to us today about data at the college. And there's lots of interesting things for him to share. So I'm going to turn it over to Kevin.
Good afternoon. I think I'm muted.
No, you're good.
Okay, I'm not. Do you all hear me or am I muted? Anybody?
We hear you.
I can hear you.
We hear you.
All right, there's a redundant little microphone. One seems to be on and one is also showing I'm muted on it, so who knows what that means. So let me begin just by getting right down to business and sharing my screen with you all, and use a PowerPoint for me to guide my conversation with you. So greetings from the Office of Assessment and Institutional Effectiveness. That's one of the things that I'm going to be talking to you about today is how am I not fully?
Yeah, I don't see it on mine. I don't see your share.
All right.
Maybe. It usually comes up on my screen.
All right.
Sorry, everybody. Is anyone else seeing the PowerPoint?
No.
Here, hang on a second. All right. There's usually, okay, share.
There.
How are we doing? All right.
Yep. Now we're good, Kevin. Thank you.
All right. Oh, well, I'm going to jump around and you'll get a preview of what's next in our presentation. So greetings from the Office of Assessment and Institutional Effectiveness. We're going to talk about our office's transition from a very traditional IR model to the institutional effectiveness type of model, talking about who the members of this group are and what we do, what our vision is for institutional effectiveness, and how we plan to transform the way information is shared. And then we're going to sort of reveal, there can't be a dramatic enough word to describe finding information, some of the existing information sources. So this is a full list of the institutional effectiveness team. Our newest member is Yuhan Hung. She's a data analyst, and that's a newly designed position in the office. John Ingram is our planning and research associate. Marissa Kaplan is our office administrator. There's yours truly, and Lucy Wong, who's a planning and research analyst as well. So that's our team. This is what we like to think we're about. We hope that we're as transparent as possible. We have sort of an open door culture here, except for right now where the door happens to be closed. We really strive for open communication and a collaborative approach to working with folks throughout the college. We're also trying to practice the continuous improvement philosophy ourselves by walking the talk, or the institutional effectiveness talk. So the first thing, I just wanted to give you an overview of what's sort of in our portfolio and the things that we help out with. And the first thing I want to say is that when we come to work every day, the first thing that's on our plate is we have an annual production calendar that we're working through. So the phone doesn't have to ring for us to already have plenty to do. And things on that calendar include compliance reporting, maintenance of the college's accredited status with middle states, things related to strategic planning, like creating the strategic plan that will be happening during the 2020 year, and other pieces of that process like key performance indicators, and the institutional effectiveness process, which is now our annual planning process. So annual planning and institutional assessment or effectiveness are integrated activities, and I'll give you a little more of a sense of how that works together. Work on grant development as well as evaluation, and that's really takes up a significant chunk of what we do here. Coordinate survey research for the institution, enrollment analysis and reporting. We do a lot of the behind the scenes work that prepares the program review data that you all use for your program assessments. Often we're working with the marketing department for a media call or helping them to prepare publications about the college. And then after all of that, the phone rings, and we're always happy to hear from our colleagues and figure out how we can help with the work at the college. Here's a definition of institutional effectiveness. It's an ongoing, evidence-based, systematic, and cyclical process. We close the loop through which college units and departments, these are develop, implement, and assess plans that support achievement of the college mission and goals. So that's sort of the new main thing about us, is that it's evidence-based cyclical planning. Some language from Middle States, they talk about, and this is what's really different here, is this piece that's underlined. They're saying the institution systematically evaluates its educational and other programs. And that's the big shift. That's a big idea hidden in the middle of a paragraph, but they want us to begin thinking of everything we do as a program, whether it's an academic program, whether it's a program of student service delivery, whether you're generating the payroll for the college, that's an administrative program. So there's this idea that everything we do is a program. And then the other change that really moves us away from the traditional IR way of thinking about ourselves to the institutional effectiveness mode is that planning and assessment are highly integrated processes. And that gives us this image here that I use. Is it's not the optimal image, but what it shows is that we're all working together to sort of have this shared culture of assessment. So we have methods and a language and an annual schedule that's recognizable to one another, whether we're a faculty member or somebody who's delivering a student service, or if you're responsible for making sure the building is heated or something like that. We're all participating in the same kind of assessment and effectiveness program. So academic program assessment, student services assessment, and administrative support unit assessment. They're all working together. We're all doing something that is recognizable to one another, and that basically administration is not exempt from the assessment process. Some more things about our department. This is a part of our planning process and our self-assessment, as we've developed mission and goals for the department in every administrative unit of the college, which there are. Well, it's a number that's always in flux. It's around 28 to 30 right now, and it depends on how you slice and dice it, but currently we're around 28, I believe. So we have mission and goals for ourselves where we advance student success and educational excellence through a service-oriented research program that emphasizes creation of new knowledge. That's what differentiates us, where we think we add value. And a strategic and data-rich approach to organizational change and renewal. And our goals are to promote a community of evidence and systematic change using a consultative and collaborative approach, to use technology, innovative use of technology to produce new insight, and that we want to improve transparency, integrity, and widespread access to information. And I'll talk a little more about what I mean by that as I keep unfolding this. But every administrative unit of the college now has a mission and goals like this. It sets the context for their assessment. Just like you have goals for your programs, we have goals for our programs. And we're setting up assessments around whether or not we're moving the needle around these big goals. In my department, we think we're succeeding when we know that the daily work at the college is closely tied to the overall mission and goals, that people understand what those mission and goals are, that people are involved in the planning process, that people have information they need to perform their jobs well, and that the college analyzes information and supporting data before making decisions. And we have data that helps us to measure this. It comes to us through the climate survey. And we take the data we get back from that pretty seriously and personally at times to make sure that those trends are moving in the direction that we want them to move. And we worked really hard on this item number 2, for example, and number 3, and we're able to make a difference in that in recent years. Some of the things we're working on in the immediate term, again, this is again a part of our assessment process, is that we're implementing the second phase of our dashboard development, and we'll talk a little more about that. We're helping all of the other administrative offices develop their measures of effectiveness. And when we have our all assessment day this coming January, this is really going to be the focus topic of that meeting, that we are going to really starting to get our heads around, measuring the effectiveness of offices. Well, how do we quantify that as much as possible? We're updating the student services assessment process. The student services assessment process really was unchanged since 2007. And we had a bit of an aha post our visit from Middle States in 2017. And we put that on our to-do list to fix. And so we're working our way through the process of updating our thinking and documentation and process around the assessment of student development services. And then our other goal for this year is to have broad-based support and engagement in the administrative assessment process. So we have some touch points where we're looking for having 100% of the administration participating in their annual assessment process. Just like I know that the faculty strive to have full participation in their process, so we're doing the same with ours. It's difficult. We're not going to hit 100. There's turnover, and things certainly happen that prevent you from that just make it impossible to make 100%. But we're going to. I think we're going to have a pretty high outcome from that. We just talked about that. So one of our priorities in general, above and beyond our annual plan, is to support the assessment of student learning. The language that Middle States used with us was sort of their watchword was sustainability. So we want to enhance the sustainability of the assessment of student learning process. I'm not sure what the name of the group is right now. It was used to be the assessment working group, but we're actively engaged in that. We provide institutional research services on request to that group. The thing that we're doing on autopilot is supporting the program review process. Now, I want to change what I just said about autopilot. We are continuing to support it in the status quo mode, but we're also working on a really different way of looking at that data, and we're going to take a look at that right now. And we were assisted in preparing the monitoring report that was submitted this spring. Another priority for us is technology. That part of our vision is that technology will be a defining attribute of our department brand. That we're working on a renewed partnership with information technology services. We have a lot of common ground with with Chuck Graham, who comes from a business intelligence background. So it makes the conversations a lot easier when we're talking about how do we measure assessment or effectiveness. And then we started out with an idea of having regular monthly meetings with ITS, and it's sort of evolved over time. They're getting sort of a core group together to talk about data, working together. We formed a brown bag lunch group to work on data analytics. And then we decided that as we were talking, we realized that we need to really enlarge that brown bag group to a more formal analytics working group that's going to help us really come up with a concrete transformation plan to get us from where we are to where we need and to be in the world of data analytics, which really has to do with moving us from operating in a world where we are doing descriptive analytics. We're always looking at the past. I always call it that sort of the the autopsy version of things. This is what happened. And the place where you really need to be is into predictive analytics, so that you understand what could happen, and then getting into prescriptive analytics, so you know what to do based on what you know is going to happen based on prescriptive analytics. So that's where the world of data is, and that's where we're trying to get ourselves to. So we're looking at changing the way information is shared, and I sort of characterize the way we do it now, and I will demonstrate the way we do it now, and you will agree that the old model is that we are brokering information, and that is a role that I've loathed for a long time. I think I'd rather have the information out there and available to people, and that we're just keeping the information stored well stocked. So a lot of it is based on static documents and web posts. It's just not a really sustainable way to go. And a lot of the information is very one-dimensional. We want to get to a world where there's, we're not the broker, we're not in the middle, that it's transparent, that it's accessible to you on demand, it's interactive, and it's multi-dimensional. You can explore different facets of the data on your own, and that the data is customized to various audiences. And for example, in my case, that we would have dashboards that are relevant to, say, a dashboard for the Veterans Office. They define what their needs are, and they can log into this technology and see what they need. And for each and every office, they would have their own dashboard to talk to them about what they need to know about whether they're achieving their goals or not. So we did pick up some technology. Has anybody out there heard of Tableau? We sort of started with a blank slate. I've got a couple hands raised here. I can't see you all. But we know that a college that I look to as an exemplar is Anne Arundel Community College, and we actually participated with a webinar on them. They're always ahead of the curve. If you're looking for ideas about good things going on in community colleges, take a look at them. There's a good local user base in the universities and in industry. That there's a very robust user group, and that we can, members of the staff here participate in that user group and go get some ideas. It was also technically reviewed by ITS. Then another thing we liked about it is that our staff can serve as developers in this environment, rather than being sort of in a partnership arrangement with ITS, rather than depending on somebody else and doing this work in technology with us. So we're gonna go on a little bit of a scavenger hunt here, and just sort of, this will kind of illustrate a couple of things, sort of show you where information that we have is. And as you see me, even though a lot of this is me fumbling around trying to find it, it'll show you really the problems with the way we store and distribute and share information. But you also, once we get there, you'll see the information that we provide for you. And then we're going to look at an alternative model. So I'm going to switch screens, views for a moment here, and I'm going to go into the bear with me for a sec. We're going to take a look at where we have the data that we have prepared for.
We still see the PowerPoint. So
okay, let me.
you might have to, since you have two monitors, flop it over. Where's the lighting?
Okay, I'm going to stop the share and just restart the share here. Are you seeing the screen now?
Still see your PowerPoint.
All right,
so.
so we'll put that down. And here.
Now
Oh,
we
yeah.
see the portal. Yeah.
Got it.
There you
Alrighty.
go.
Sorry, everybody. So we were first going to take a look find the program review data. So we're on the administrative portal here on MyCCAC. And the first thing you need to know about is I'm hidden in this category called Planning and Governance. And then you can go to the department name, Assessment and Institutional Effectiveness. And then we'll go to Assessment of Student Learning. And I'm going to ask Caroline, is this linked from the faculty page? It isn't?
No, people have a really hard time finding it because it's
Yeah.
nested and you can't search for program review data anymore, so it doesn't show up.
Yeah.
But we can link to it.
Yeah. So, and I'll just click on a couple of these. Let me just show you, first of all, there's a couple of tables in here. And I'm going to show you these really primarily for contrast. And then when you're doing your program reviews, if you've done one of these lately, you know you have to come to this page. You come in, you say, here's the program enrollment table. And isn't that delightful? Does everybody want to read this? It's just a lot of eyewash, and you have to sort of pick out all this information from the programs. And there's this document that's probably 236 pages long. So you have to scroll through this, find your program, and find your data to basically transcribe over to your program review document to do this. So this is just the program enrollments table. Let's take a look at the, there's a graduates table that mercifully that isn't as long. And then here's where the graduate survey data is. So as you do that, you can look for, and let me see. I'm going to open up just one of these because I think you're getting the idea. So this is, what is your employment status? Right. So you can open up one of these programs, and again, you see just lots of information to look at here, and hard to find. But I'm going to see if I can find one that matches my example that I'm going to show. I always like to use nursing because they have so many numbers. So we've got a fairly good response from the nurses. There's 937 responses in here in the survey data. It's based on 5 years worth of data, whether they've accomplished their goals, and then here's their employment status. So it looks like it's not even percentalized into any kind of rate for you. So it just says of all the people who've responded to this, 554 saying they're working full time, a certain number saying that they're 500. No, yeah, it says how many are working in related employment and so forth. So it's not even presented to you as a rate. Some information about the employer location. Again, if you've had the experience of using this data, it's a little difficult to find your way through and just really basically transcribe all this. But it's been our system for many years, and we're looking at a way that we can improve the way that this information is shared with you through different technology. There was another couple of other items on the scavenger hunt. Oh, the faculty hiring data. This is another one. If you've not, this is used by governance, but it's actually even hidden under the teaching, and it's attributed to the department heads. And then you can find the reporting that gives you the data on the portions of instruction that are provided by what percentage of the instruction is delivered by full-time faculty in the department. So you can see that there's an aspiration for being 50% or greater, and that varies depending on the campus versus the institution overall. So there's another resource. We just updated this again for the current hiring process. And then we'll just sort of take another look at one other data source, and that is the Ruffalo Noel Levitz SSI data, which is a survey project that we coordinate on behalf of the college. And this is available here again under the planning and governance, but you will find this under planning. And the Ruffalo Noel Levitz survey is a survey of student opinion. It's an inventory of student opinion that's taken largely at points of service delivery, but it also looks at general impressions about various aspects of the college. And we've got a lot of detailed data about the institution. We have 4 years of data and time series, and then we have it as well broken out by Allegheny and Homewood Russian as a group, Boyce campus, North campus, South campus plus the Washington Crown Center, and the West Hills Center. And so you can get into one of these reports, and you really just find out a lot about your student bodies. And I would say the student body, this may be very useful to you if you're working on a grant and you need to describe the student body quickly. For example, there's one thing in here that we use here is that we find out that about the student's employment status. You see that a lot of our students are, a significant number of our students, at least the respondents here, are working full-time or part-time. And then the other thing that we found is that there's this information on disabilities. Our databases don't collect that about students, but we have a sample that tells us what percentage of our students have disabilities. And some other things about general impression. Would you recommend it to a friend? 93% would recommend CCAC to a friend, so that's pretty nice. And then from here, it basically provides in pretty significant detail an analysis of the college's performance in terms of different areas, either academic areas or administrative areas. There's a section on instructional effectiveness, and that might be something that you want to look at as AFT members and see what your role might be in making a difference in this area. Also, advising is in here, so there's another area that you could drill down on there. I'm not going to look at the data per se. I just wanted to bring this to your attention and really show you an example of the way we're organized now, and to basically provide a contrast to the direction that we want to go in the future with our data. So that would be what I'm going to show you next. Oops, wrong presentation, pardon me.
We want to go back to that.
Yep. Common hour, right, there we go. So again, here's another example of the sort of the one-dimensionality of what are you seeing? You're seeing this.
Yeah, I see.
All right.
I think the two screens
Yeah.
too much for
I'm going to need a new share. I'm going to go here. Share. There we go. So when we have a question about the college, we're kind of like working with an abacus here. So we say, well, what is our fall-to-fall retention rate? So we produce a graph, and it shows that we have this rate that's around 46 or 47%. And then what's a question? What does data like that always lead to? And this is what's the next question? How can we slice and dice that a little bit and understand that a little different. So we can look at it, well, what's the difference between the retention of female students and male students? Does it make a difference? And so what do we have to do is we sort of have to craft a new chart, and it's kind of static and it's posted someplace. And this shows that, that other chart. And then so we said, well, what about some other student trait, like whether they're full or part-time? And this does sort of follow your instincts of being a part-time student. You might be less likely or have lower retention rates than your full-time students. And then, well, what are as an ATD school that we're asked to, to drill down on all the student traits. And we looked at what are the challenges or the differences for students from different backgrounds. So again, this is all kind of a very, not a very dynamic way of doing this. We often do this like once a term, and then somebody else thinks, well, what about this? And it becomes a fairly notable project to manipulate this data and really get different views into it. So there is an alternative, and it is this Tableau software or data analytics software. So let's take a look at an example of that retention case in practice. And I want to move to the retention dashboard, which is right here.
We still see the PowerPoint.
All right, so I think there's a trick where it says you have to reshare it. So I'm going to go. This is new share. And, okay. Are you? All right. No.
There,
All right,
got it.
good. All right. Luckily, we have 4 computers in the room that help me do this. So this is the more interactive way of looking at that retention question. And this is still the same metric, the fall to fall retention. Only it gives the user the ability to kind of analyze it themselves. So we're going to look at different characteristics. Let me just sort of orient you to this. This is the top of the bars represent the total enrollment, and then the headcount enrollment, and then the pink are the return students, and the blue are the non-returning students. And so we can begin to look at this by the different attributes. So I think one of the things we looked at was the differences by gender. So you could pull this down. So let's just see what happens when we just look at the retention rate for the female student population. And switch to, yeah. So you can see that the chart changes as you include and exclude attributes. So you can see that the female student retention rate is closer to 50-50 more often than not than it is when we don't consider gender. Another way to think is you could add another layer onto this and say, well, what about the student's material needs? So is this somebody that has the resources they need in life to fully focus on being a student and attend college? So we can go and we use Pell as an indicator of that material need. This is an interesting phenomenon, by the way. So I'm going to take away a couple of these features and we'll just say, let's take a look at the female students who are on Pell. And you can see actually that Pell status increases the the retention rate of students, when particularly the female, jumped up to 56.8. This is a little something that we're learning. We were actually using Pell, thinking of Pell as a risk factor, that if somebody were using Pell, we thought that that was something that would lead to them to have higher attrition rather than less attrition. So we're already learning something from this. Now I can take the female selection out of this and say, look at it for all of our students, then that phenomenon still persists. It looks like there's a slightly higher rate for female students. This is an interesting way of looking at this data. It gives us a more dynamic way. It runs over a data warehouse. We create the data warehouse and set these up for users to access these things on their own. Let's take just while we've got you here, let's sort of clear all these other factors, just to include all gender. And then let's take the Pell out of it. So we get us back to square one. And then let's take a look at the impact of developmental on their retention. So we'll take away the all. And we're using, let's use college ready. This means that the students took the placement test exams and they didn't require any developmental courses. So you can see that they've got a fairly high retention rate. We could switch the story and we said these are the students that required the developmental, still don't have the college ready. So you can see they have a lower retention rate, so they're a little more at risk than those that are college ready. And then we could even go into this and look at it in terms of the students. You could perhaps drill down on the effect of having a high level of developmental need and being a student of color perhaps, and just get a lot of good data on this one topic. So the thing about it is the number of topics these dashboards can be about is fairly, it's limitless. Okay. So that's one example of the dashboard, and shows us a way that we can make the information more accessible, transparent, and dynamic, so that you don't have to go through anybody, and also gives you the power to develop insights into that information without having to write back and say, gee, Kevin, those first 4 slides were great, but we need 3 more. This way you can explore that yourself. And we are not in that role of brokering, but in the role of sort of sustaining a system like this that gives people the tools they need to provide the information they need. So we're going to take another look at another application that we developed, as we call this as a proof of concept. And this is an alternative way of, I just want to take you back and you recall that long journey we took to look at all the different data elements that you had to dig through the CCAC portal page to find, to basically pull together the data points for your program review. This is a single page that draws on multiple sources. It pulls multiple databases into one window for one program. And the example I'm using here, I'm using nursing just because they tend to have so darn much data that it's provide just a better example. We have a drop-down window. This is still a proof of concept, so we don't have these labeled yet. So right now we have to find them by their program number. But once we pull up that program number, it goes into our databases and it tells us, oh, this is CCAC's program 575 nursing. The U.S. Department of Ed code for nursing is this zip code, and that's the official federal name of a program that teaches somebody to be a registered nurse. And the current enrollment, based on the data, the test data that this is running on, was 890 students. It gives you a time series on the FTE in the program, a time series on the headcount in the program, the year-over-year numeric change, the year-over percentage change, a nice visual of the both headcount and FTE side by side on one chart. This is, I think, this might be a part of our experiment, just sort of looking what are the different bells and whistles on this, and so that we could probably remove some of these things that are redundant, but while we designed this. But you can see that it's interesting that as you hover over each one of these bars, it's also going back through and highlighting the data table that reflects this. So I think this gives us a lot more of an insightful way, and you can go through this and select the student population you're interested in looking at. And you say, well, show this to me for the first generation nurses. And so there's the enrollment component. And you remember that how we were looking at enrollment on the CCAC portal-based version. Here it is all on one page. Here's the graduates for the nursing program. And again, it gives you the time series, the year-over-year numeric change, and the year-over-year percentage change. So there's your graduates for your this particular program. You go to labor market data. This is pulls from another database. This is from the EMSI data, which this is a classic situation of me brokering information to you. Your instructions are when you're doing your program review to call this office, and we run an EMSI analysis for you, and we email you a PDF document. What this does is it takes the same underlying data and it puts it into this dashboard. So it tells you that there are 24,500 nursing jobs in this labor market, which is Allegheny County, and that there'll be 27,000 plus in 2029. It's an increase of 2,600 and approaching an 11% increase in jobs. So this is like if you're doing a program review, you're saying, I'm in a growing field, right? So that's some of the labor market data. There's another piece that also comes from this MZ source, which is earnings. So it shows earnings in percentiles. So the median of all nurses is $31 an hour. If you're a 75th percentile, you're up close to 37. If you're a 25th percentile, you're $25 an hour. And then we have another sort of touch point in our wage data. We get through the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We're able to do matches. This is abstract Department of Labor data about the nursing field. This is about the earnings of our graduates. So, and these are their earnings 2 quarters after leaving CCAC. So they're earning at the 25th percentile rate. So that makes sense. They're right out of the chute. They're newly minted grads versus folks who've been nurses for 10 or 15 or plus years. This kind of validates the EMSI data and our survey data. So it shows that immediately after graduating, they're making $28 an hour. There's another analysis of the labor market demand in this field. It talks about how many openings there are versus how many completions there are. So they're saying there's almost 1,600 openings a year, 1,300 graduates a year. So the gap analysis is there's a difference of a positive difference of 300 unfilled nursing positions, or at least 300 more nursing positions than there are graduates. So this is an indicator, if you're reviewing a program, that there's certainly this labor market isn't overcrowded, that it isn't being flooded by completers. There are actually programs that if you know, people say, hey, we're thinking about starting a program about this, and we'll go and we'll do the analysis. We'll say, look, there's like 3 or 4 other people doing this, or one other person who's already there ahead of you has already flooded the market. There's way more, they're producing way more graduates than the labor market can support, and we can decide whether it's an ethical question or not for us to provide people with a degree in that field. Right? So this visualizes our enrollment trend and our graduate trend. And I think, so this shows that in this case, in nursing, I think their numbers have turned up, but in the experimental data that we were using, they were in a slight downward slope. So we computed the slope value for that. And then we also, their number of graduates, they're being very productive in terms of the students in their program, is on an upslope. So we also computed a slope value for that. And we put together a small rubric. We haven't created an overall score for it that takes into account, just again, this is to prove the concept. What if we were to look at enrollment growth, the productivity in terms of graduates, and the labor market, as whether or not there's growth in this field or not growth. And if we were to sum, this is an idea that came to us from Prince George's Community College. They ran a rubric against their program review process. But they were doing it a lot like our process, you know, the one I was showing where everyone was looking at a lot of paper and people were getting out their iPhones and using them as calculators to figure these things out. This way, we can populate those, we can build the rubric into this program dashboard. The other thing about this dashboard is it puts everybody on the same page. Deans and administrators and faculty can all have the even playing field in terms of looking at the data related to a program. So I think that shows presents a pretty stark difference between you know, the way we're doing things now and the direction we hope to be going in terms of getting information to you. There are a few challenges to this. There is a cost factor to it that we're dealing with. So I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint now and leave this. And are you seeing the PowerPoint? No. I'm going to reshare that. Share. All right. We're not looking at the right screen, however. Sorry. There. And here we go. All right. So the vendor has a pretty nice, this Tableau has a nice blog page, and we get a lot of nice feedback. They have the do's and don'ts of dashboards. And I say it's a craft. It's a mix of science, art, and communication, storytelling. Then their advice is that to do this well, it takes time, collaboration, iteration. We're not going to get it right the first time, but certainly we feel like we did create a pretty, what actually blew my mind, the proof of concept on this. And now that we've seen that the rudimentary ideas can work, we're going to shop it around to get feedback and fine tune it and really press it to work the way we want it to work. But right now, we can see that the rudimentary ideas work. So that's some of the information talk. And I just wanted to wrap this up with some ideas about how it can be helpful to work with us and so we can do successful collaborations together. One thing that helps us a lot is lead time on things. So if you have something that has a deadline on it and you think you may need our help, or you want to just check in with me or a member of the staff, certainly lead time is important because we are juggling multiple projects. So, you know, we we hate to triage people and say like, hey, you're going to be late, but you're going to be on time. So it's important to provide us with lead time. If you have some ideas about some research, we recommend having a conversation with us and maybe flesh out what you're thinking about from a consultative sort of approach. If you aren't locked into, if you're evaluating a grant, there's an ironclad template that you have to respond to. But if you're really if you have a little more latitude, it's useful to meet with us and discuss how you want to approach that, because we can really tell you, if you're really. But what happens is when we are approached by people who are very prescriptive, it closes off opportunities. So we're talking about ideas and talking about how can we get there. That we might have some ideas that gets you where you want to be. It might be different than what you were originally thinking, but I think the overall result is the correct way to go. So we recommend a consultative approach. And then the last piece of it is that we want to collaborate with you. That we are blessed. We have have a full complement of staff right now, but there's 1,000 college employees, and there are 5 of us, so we really can't go full on with everybody. So we need to do things with you collaboratively. We can do what we do well and step aside for others to do what they do well and work together. So that's what we like to think about in terms of a good client relationship for us. Don't procrastinate if you have something. Get right to us, and let's really talk about how we can handle it, and expect for us to want to collaborate with you. So at that point, I just want to open it up to discussion.
If anybody has any questions, you can put them in the chat or just unmute yourself and go ahead and ask.
This is this
is normal.
All right.
It takes people a couple minutes. I will be very grateful for one when I don't have to make individual graphs anymore in Excel, and I can just look at the dashboard and
yeah,
because that is one of my least favorite tasks.
Well,
doing a program review every other year for biology or biotech.
One of the things that
so Dawn asked a question. It's do you have a glossary of commonly used terms to help facilitate our self-searching? So we have help and support for navigating the dashboards once they are open and available to all.
Yeah. No, Dawn, I hadn't really thought of that. So I think that what we'll be doing is, well, first of all, one of the things you'll find is that when you see this environment, it's very intuitive, that the information is in project folders, and it'll also, so you'll be able to say, well, here's a project folder about retention. But yeah, let me think about that idea of, the language of using the dashboard. That's a good insight.
Go ahead. I think South Campus has a question.
Yes, we do. I was wondering how we access the data.
You mean the dashboard?
Not only the dashboard, but all data that we may need for research projects, grants, status of our program assessment, and all the varied things that would be important, realizing that you only have 5 members on your staff to accommodate all of our requests.
Correct. Yeah. Well, I hope that what I demonstrated was showing you where the program review data was. And then that's how you access it, is on the college portal site, right? And then when it isn't there, I would say default to my tips for working with us and get in touch with us and tell us what you're looking for, and we will help you to locate it. It's usually best to send us an email message, and that way it gives us a sort of a ticket that says that we're working on something for you. Or certainly feel free to call us as well, and we'll guide you to that. We're not in that world that I want to get to where it's there. We're just sort of looking at much less than the tip of the iceberg. We've just got to first sense that there's this idea that there might be icebergs out there, but we're getting there. But to show you where we're heading.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for the question.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have another question at South?
No?
Oh, okay.
I wanted to respond to something that Caroline said about making graphs. One of the other things that you can do with the Tableau is as you sort of toggle through that and you get to the sort of the answer, when you find the information you need, you can actually export that data to a PDF or to a PowerPoint slide, into a couple other formats. So that'll really help you with your productivity. Instead of the business of creating a PowerPoint slide from scratch, it exports it to a PowerPoint slide for you.
That'll be nice for when you have to go visit the academic planning and you have to display all your information.
Yeah.
So. All right, well, if there aren't any more questions, then we will go ahead and end our Common Hour session for the day. Thank you so much to everybody who is logged in online. And I will certainly make sure the links get on our assessment LibGuide to the data Kevin showed today. I can put them in a couple places so you can see them. And as you said, email if you have additional questions. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for your interest.
You.
Bye. Bye-bye.